So, welcome to this evening's session from presentation to journal submissions. And with us, we have the fabulous Dr. Alex Reyes and Dr. Liana Verano. And they are distinguished scholars and educators dedicated to advancing equity and access for culturally and linguistically diverse learners. Dr. Reyes is an associate professor at Georgia Southern University, where she coordinates the ESOL endorsement program and prepares educators to support multilingual students. Her work is grounded in experiences across P-12 education, nonprofit sectors, and higher education in multiple states, with a scholarly focus on language, culture, identity, and arts integration to foster inclusive learning environments. While Dr. Hirano is a professor of teacher education at Berry College and director of the Teaching English as a Foreign Language minor. Originally from Brazil, she earned her PhD in applied linguistics from Georgia State University. Her research examines the relationship between identity and language learning, academic literacies, and second language teacher education. She also serves as a senior editor for the Georgia TESOL Journal, contributing to the field's ongoing dialogue and development. Together, Dr. Reyes and Dr. Hirano bring a wealth of expertise, global perspectives, and a shared commitment to empowering educators and learners in multilingual contexts. And with that, I will stop sharing and let them take the lead. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you and welcome. All right, do you want to share or do you want me to, Eliana?
You can go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Maria.
Yes, appreciate
Welcome. My honor.
it. You sound really, really impressive. So as I am struggling to get this going, I'm going to find, Yep. Sorry, I need to find my Zoom. I lost you. I'm going to move you over here for a minute. Okay, there we go. Okay, now let me share. Everybody should be able to see. Yes?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. All right, I'm just going to throw us over here so I can see what's going on. Okay, so welcome everybody. Eliana and I are talking about kind of moving from presentation into journal submission because we get a lot of questions about that, and we always encourage folks to move their presentations into journal submissions and to get those publications. So welcome, welcome. Sorry, wrong thing. So for our outline of our presentation, what we're talking about today, very quickly, we'll introduce ourselves, talk about the goal of today's talk, give you a little bit of background about the journal so you understand where we're coming from, talk about the submission types, and then get into the more specific pieces of preparing your presentations for journal submission. We're going to actually talk you through an example and show you what that could look like in getting from presentation to paper. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions and comments. So with that, we'll introduce ourselves. So Eliana and I are senior editors of the Georgia TESOL Journal. And I am Alex Reyes, and I think Maria did a really beautiful job of introducing us, so I don't think we need to say too much more about it. And I will let my colleague introduce herself.
All right, so I'm Eliana Hirano. I'm professor of teacher education at Berry College. And like Maria said, both Alex and I are very passionate about the field of ESOL in general, but we are really passionate about providing a venue for folks that work with ESOL, with multilingual learners, and teaching to have a venue where they can spread their expertise more widely. And conference presentations are wonderful, and they are a great beginning to start thinking about how to publish your piece, because that would have a more lasting impression, and you would be able to reach a lot more people with publications. So with that, we will actually start talking a little bit about the journal first so that whoever's in the audience can understand a little bit more about the different types of articles that we publish so that you can then later think about how your presentation can fit the journal. So the Georgia CISO Journal is a practitioner-oriented, peer-reviewed journal that publishes articles that are practical, they're theoretical, they're research-based. So it's important to emphasize how we are really practitioner-oriented in the sense that we are not interested in just developing theory or research for its own sake, but we really want to see how the theory and research helps our readership, our practitioners in making their jobs better, and also how the practice of teachers and instructors can feed into research and principles in teaching and learning multilingual learners. So we focus on all educational levels from pre-K to university, adult education, workplace literacy settings. And we also, another very important aspect of the Georgia TESOL Journal is that we really focus on supporting and mentoring new authors to make this process that might be new for, for some of the folks. So we try to follow new novice authors throughout this process. So we'll talk now a little bit about the different types of submissions that we have available in our journal. So we have mainly three main categories of manuscripts. The first one is empirical research and literature reviews, which is mostly what one would think in terms of academic articles, but we also have a category called pedagogical practices, programs, policy, and perspectives. And we have teaching techniques. So we will talk about each of them in turn so that you guys can be thinking about what kind of submission would best fit the kinds of presentation and the kind of work that you do. So I'll let Alex start by talking about the empirical research.
Okay, so as Eliana said, this is sort of what we think of as the most traditional sort of academic journal article is going to fall into this category of empirical research or literature review. And so empirical research is based on work where you've actually conducted some type of a study and are presenting about that study and the findings. And a literature review is also a type of research where you're examining, basically, you're examining research that exists around a given topic to identify some theme, some gap, expanded in a new way. And that just helps us understand the situation of the field a little bit more. So here we've included for each of the three types just a little snapshot from our most recent journal issue that was published, I believe, last week or the week before. I've lost track of time. But our fall 2025 issue. And you can see how they're kind of laid out in our journal. And then also we've included the abstract for each of them so you can see how we're really condensing. We want to be able to present, a quick snapshot of what is this article about. And there's always keywords that we use as well. And the keywords help people as they're interested in learning more and finding articles and reading that helps them locate your work. So that if you're interested in dual language, then that needs to be one of the keywords that you would search. And then that would bring up items with that tag. And so again, these research-based articles are going to show evidence of what we call rigorous scholarship. So you're going to talk about the methodology that you use. You're going to talk about the findings. You're going to talk about, situated with the literature review, etc. And what's really key is that you're making an original contribution to the field of ESOL education. And sometimes we feel like, education is education, and it's hard to think of a new thing because it's so big and it's been around for so long. but every contribution can be original and unique based on your context, your expertise, your specific approaches, and all of those things, right? You've got lots of references that you're going to include in one of these research or literature review pieces. And also, you want to provide some amount of insight so that it can be applied to other contexts, right? So there's sort of implications for that. These are typically longer pieces, so between 15 and 25 pages, double spaced, and that includes references and appendices. So this is the first of our three types. So Eliana will tell you about the next one.
All right, so I'll talk about pedagogical practices, programs, policy, and perspectives. So, unlike the empirical research, in this category, you'll have the opportunity to produce a somewhat extensive viewpoints. It's not like, so if you look at the length, we're talking about 15 to 20 pages, but you don't have to collect your own data. What you're going to do is read widely, but it's not just like a literature review. You are actually producing viewpoints on, it can be a pedagogical practice that you see emerging in the field or that you yourself do, or new ESOL programs. So you can be talking about, for example, newcomer programs, or you can talk about different ESOL policies or different perspectives regarding the ESOL field. So mainly the idea is that these have to be really well argued viewpoints on current themes or emerging themes. So you can talk about theory, research, pedagogy. It's really a pretty wide net here that you can focus on. Analysis of different approaches. You can focus on different student populations, curricular changes, pilot studies, and really other discussions. So if you look at the one that we have in the fall 2025 issue, we have a very well argued paper that looks at using AI tools to integrate different standards so that the instructor, the teachers can then use their time on developing units and lessons, but not so much time looking at all the different standards and making an alignment that makes sense. So different issues have had different types of articles in this section, but it's an area where you have more freedom to explore different current trends in the field. And then Alex will now talk about teaching techniques.
Thank you. Yes. And so the third type of article that we publish in the Georgia TESOL Journal are teaching techniques. And these are brief articles. And here you're actually just highlighting an original practice that you've used as the author, that you've used successfully in your class, and then you are providing basically the background and framework and the step-by-step so that somebody else could then try that technique out in their own teaching, right? And so there's also, in addition to, here's how I did it in my classroom, it's also going to give some recommendations and suggestions for how that might be adapted and adopted into other contexts as well. And so you can see here, it's between 500 and 2,000 words, so significantly shorter. I would say that's approximately between 2 and 8 pages, double spaced, compared to where the others are, up to 25 pages. So you can kind of see the difference there. There's a substantial difference. And the thing is, you should think about this as a technique would be applicable to a wide variety of contexts, even though you're talking about a specific instance where you've used it in your own class. You're going to give that guidance so that others can implement it, right? And these are things like, it could be warm-up activities, long-term projects, technology integrated. We're seeing a lot more discussion around actually using technology integrated activities, because it's one thing to talk about it and it's another thing to actually have kind of a roadmap to follow on how to do that, right? And then again, other discussions of interest, but whereas the empirical research and literature review are very heavily research based, our pedagogical perspectives, programs, policies, practices, I know I said them in the wrong order, are kind of along a variety of topics, but really fleshing out one of these concepts. And then the teaching technique is a bit more focused and narrow on the specific technique as it's been used in your own context and experience.
All right. So now that you all know a little bit better about the types of submissions that our journal works with, it's really helpful if you start thinking of your presentation as the first step in your manuscript development, right? So now you're thinking about the presentation that you're gonna give in the conference next week, then you can be thinking about, okay, so I think my presentation aligns better with this kind of submission in the Georgia TESOL Journal. So then the first thing that we'd recommend that you do is go to the journal website, the Georgia TESOL Journal website, and look at the guidelines for each of the submissions and see what the requirements are. So the descriptions that we have in the journal, they're quite precise, explaining what it's in the author guidelines section, saying what you need to think about when you prepare a manuscript for that kind of submission. So it's kind of like, if you all know the concept of backwards design. So you start by thinking of your outcome, and then you think backwards and what you need to do in order to achieve that outcome. So as you organize your presentation, keep these guidelines in mind, and then try to think of how you can address the different expectations and requirements for that submission.
Yes, and I think that's also, we're talking to you thinking specifically with the Georgia TESOL Journal in mind as your destination, but this would be also practicable advice, wherever you might choose to publish, really thinking about what does that end goal look like, what are the expectations, and then working from there. And I just wanted to say that I was thinking, as I was choosing a graphic here, I was thinking of like, oh, a map, right? Because you need to know where you're trying to get to. You put the destination, and then from there, you build the route to get there. And so that's what we're thinking about doing here with these presentations. So, and I know for a lot of folks, the idea of presentation sounds scary. Publication sounds scary. It feels intimidating, and it is, because it's hard work, and we may not necessarily be used to working in that way. But the fact is, as educators, as educational professionals, we're sharing our work all the time. We share it in all kinds of ways, in all kinds of venues, right? There's our more traditional, what we're talking about with our Georgia TESOL conference, it's conference presentations, right? There might be papers, there could be posters, roundtables, panels. There's all different ways that presentations might look at a conference, right? And then additionally, in our regular work, we're giving workshops, trainings, we're teaching, that's a form of presentation. We're doing professional developments, we're giving research presentations, we're presenting information at faculty meetings. So again, this idea that, the idea of presenting might sound scary, but the fact is we do it all the time as part of our work. And so something to think about in terms of moving from, number one, the presentation space of the Georgia TESOL conference, which, if you're coming for the first time, welcome. You're going to love it. And if you're coming back, I can't wait to see you again next week. But the idea is, like, it's a very supportive community. It's a very supportive community of colleagues, of learners, of educators. And so that also follows into our work with the journal. So Eliana mentioned that we are supportive and offer mentorship. And so this series that we're offering here is part of that, right? And helping you think through what does it look like to move from a presentation into a journal submission. Okay, how do I go about publishing in a journal? What happens when we get feedback? And so we're here to help support you through those different pieces and those different steps.
All right, so let's work on a more practical level now. So let's think of an example um, of the teaching technique. So imagine you are a teacher, an instructor, and you want to share a technique or a strategy, something that you have used in your own classroom that you thought, I think this is pretty cool, and I think maybe that would be helpful for others, because really, we don't want everybody to be reinventing the wheel. If you have something that you think is worthwhile, please do share it with more people. So here's what we thought would be like a step-by-step process in developing a teaching technique piece for the journal. So set the scene. So why do you think your technique or your strategy is interesting? Or why do you think others might be interested in what you're doing? Is it novel? Is it needed? And then tell us more about your teaching context. Who do you teach? Who's your audience? What kind of students do you have? What kind of school or educational setting is it? What is the language proficiency of your students? And then explain step by step how it is that your strategy works. So you have to bear in mind that whoever is reading your piece does not know you, does not know your context. So be as clear as you can so that if others want to do what you have done, that they can follow your steps or your step-by-step instructions, and they can essentially replicate your teaching technique. And then tell us, how did your students respond to your technique? What did they learn? How effective was it? Would you change anything if you could do it again? And then, very importantly, think that your readers, in all likelihood, do not work in the exact same context that you do, right? So try to help your reader envision how your strategy can be adapted to different contexts, to different audiences, different kinds of students, right? So be as helpful as you can to your reader so that they can then go ahead and after reading your piece, they say, hey, I'm going to try this technique in my classroom and see how my students respond to it. So this is a pretty good step-by-step process for how you can transform something that you do in your classroom into a teaching technique piece.
There's a question in the chat from one of David's doctoral students asking if a poster presentation should go first, then to journal.
That's a great question. So a poster presentation, just like any conference presentation, is a wonderful first step towards developing a manuscript for publication, right? And the beautiful thing about a poster presentation is that you get to interact one-on-one with a lot of people. So you'll be there presenting your poster. So make sure you have your spiel, like I always, tell my students, have like a 1 minute spiel, a 5 minute spiel, see how much the person that's stopping by your poster is interested in your topic, and get as much feedback as you can from these people, because that will help you think about, okay, so these are things that people are interested in. This is really the contribution that my poster is making to the field. So I would think of a poster presentation very much like a paper presentation. Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and I don't want to mess with the screen and change it, so because I'm having a little struggle. But it's really in a similar fashion too. the way we're asking you to really consider carefully which type of publication you're interested in. Like, what kind of article are you trying to write? Where does that fall with the topics? When you are putting in conference proposals, it's important to be thoughtful with the types of presentation that you choose as well, right? So a poster presentation works really well for to communicate certain types of information. It's not great for everything, right? A workshop tends to be more interactive and more application based. So that's not for everything. And it's also going to vary from conference to conference as well, what the expectations are. So I have a lot of colleagues outside of education, and that's very interesting because they do things quite differently. And many of them are expected only to present on work that's been completed. Whereas in education, a lot of times we're talking about things that are in process, right? Um, and so again, important to know what are the norms and expectations for the conference where you're presenting. What are those different formats look like? And then when you're ready to turn a presentation into a publication, where you're publishing and what types of actual manuscripts you have. I can't see the chat right now, so if there's another question that's relevant, we can take it.
Not right now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we'll continue. Okay, so we kind of gave you an example of thinking through a teaching technique and the kinds of information that you would be expected to include in a teaching technique as a written publication, right? So in practical terms, your presentation outline should form the skeleton of your manuscript. So if you think about it as being the frame or the skeleton, and then really you're going to flesh that out, right? Like add the meat to that in the written format. So if you're using a slideshow, for example, and again, this varies what expectations and customs are depending on different organizations and venues and things like that. Think of each slide as kind of representing one section or a subsection of your manuscript is a good way to kind of think it through. Think about using visuals to support your presentation, right? The attendees are there to hear you talk about your work. They don't want to read all of it on a slide, and they don't, in our field, we don't want to listen to somebody reading a paper at you, right? So the expectation is more that you, as the presenter, have the knowledge and can translate and interpret that to communicate it, right? And those visuals are going to be helpful. Whereas you would think about how you might expand that presentation into a written manuscript, right? Again, that idea of like adding more flesh to it, because a journal article is a really great place to get your thoughts put out in even more detail. So in a 45-minute presentation, for example, which is longer than many more academic and scholarly conferences, a lot of times you'll only have 10 to 12 minutes to present your work, right? So you can only kind of hit the highlights, and you're really getting to the outline and that skeleton. So in a written format is where you can really, again, get in there, detail it, flesh it out, add the extra information, add the supporting examples, add all of the necessary citations and references to help have a more robust piece. And then here I kind of mocked up this idea of, so if we envision, for example, that we were presenting on a teaching technique that we've used, a teaching strategy, right? I'm talking about a warm-up that I've used. I'm talking about a communication activity. I'm talking about a group project that I've done. Anything that would fall in line with the teaching technique, if I were to present that, we can imagine that these rectangles represent slides, right? So if we're thinking of it as a presentation and a slideshow, right? You want to think of like you'd have your introduction. This is the technique. Here's why I used it. Okay, so again, thinking about those questions of like, what is the background? It's new, it's novel, it hasn't been used in my context. It's really important, it's very much needed, it's been missing, right? Then the teaching context, this is who and what I teach. the instructions, right? So here's the overview, and then you actually want to give out those step by steps. And then you want to have that discussion part. Okay, here's how it went. Here's how you might adapt it for different contexts. A conclusion where we're saying like, okay, well, this is here's why it's important. This is how I can extend this work. And then typically in a presentation, you want to have space for questions and answers from the audience so that they can engage, right? And then the good thing to always include is your contact information and a thank you. And so that's how I'm kind of envisioning this idea of like a mock-up slide presentation, right? And then you can see it on the right-hand side. We're actually translating that into a paper outline where we would actually write the paper of the teaching technique. So these would kind of line up with like, okay, introduction, why this technique? What's the background, right? 2, teaching context, who, what, where, any other relevant details. 3, the step-by-step instructions. And very key is to include those support materials. If you say that you did this example and you used a certain framework, like a literal framework, then we want to see what that frame looks like. If you are using some kind of scaffolding technique like a graphic organizer, let's see what that graphic organizer looks like. Okay, we want to see what that looks like in practice so we can really understand how this might be useful for us and how we might change it, modify it, adapt it to work in our individual teaching situations, right? Then you get into that discussion. So I did this teaching technique with my students and they really loved it. It was super successful. Everybody became instantly super proficient. Everybody was like the most amazing writer afterwards. Whatever that is, right? Or maybe like we tried it and you know what? There were some spaces where I could do something a little bit differently. And that's an important part of the discussion as well, right? To be reflective practitioners. And then, so here's what I did. Here's how it went. Here's how you might use it. You could use this in an elementary classroom by doing such and such, in a social studies classroom by doing XYZ, for adult learners doing blah, 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 right? Helping people think through how this can be meaningful and applicable to their own lives and work. And then in the conclusion, we always want to talk about like, so what? Okay, so you did an activity with your students and, well, that's where you want to expand why that's important, what the meaning is from that, and then what's next, right? And so that's a lot of times, so this is kind of a mock-up again of an outline for a teaching technique that could be taken directly from what you might have in presentation slides. Or if you are doing, for example, there was a question about a poster presentation. Typically your poster presentation, you're going to have those different sections as well. So again, think about mapping that onto an outline that you would then expand, flesh out to help you form the body of your paper and your manuscript. Is there a question?
No, it's just a comment
Okay.
that it was a helpful technique.
Oh,
So
great.
that's great.
Eliana, do you have anything to add to this before we continue on?
No, I think this is all very helpful. So yes, you
Okay.
did a great job. Thank you.
All right. So then the next thing we want to make sure that we're thinking about.
Yeah, so whether you're thinking of your manuscript or currently focusing more specifically on your presentation, remember that you always have to cite your sources and include references, right? So we owe so much of our knowledge and inspiration on the work of others, so we have to make sure that we are citing them accordingly. And it's really, really helpful for us and also for your own lives if you get in the habit of using APA 7th edition when you cite your sources. Sometimes you get really great manuscripts in which folks did not cite their sources following APA 7th, and it's just a bummer because you'll get then a ton of feedback and a ton of comments saying that, hey, you did not use APA 7th. And it's just like, it's just polluting the comments, in my opinion. We need to make those comments because you'll have to fix them. But this is something that from the get-go, you can do that yourself. So just get in the habit of citing using APA 7th in your citations in text, in your references. It will just make your manuscript easier for us to read, and you will avoid comments that you could have taken care of from the get-go. So it's just a matter of really habit more than anything. So just make sure you do that.
Yes, and I added this in here as well because typically in when I'm giving a presentation, I have a slide specifically for the references. And again, that's good because that communicates to your audience that you're not just making stuff up, but that you are pulling from validated, relevant work. And it also makes it easier for you when you do get ready to get in there and write up your paper that your references are already there and you can start to kind of pull those ideas together. So kind of squished a bunch of stuff on here. First of all, we want to take any questions that folks have or any comments. And you can be as specific or general as you want.
Um, I just have a few questions about the presentation. Yeah, I first really appreciate for the nice presentation, and it's going to be my first time presenting my work next week at GAT, so I'm so excited. I just wanted to ask a few things in terms of research-based articles publishing, because I'm doing my paper presentation for 45 minutes next week. And I was wondering, just a small question, whether I think it was saying from 15 to 25 pages limit, including reference and appendix. And I was wondering if that also include or exclude abstract as well, or is it just something else? Like,
The abstract does not count.
okay, sure. Good.
No, and an abstract is typically not, you really don't want one that's more than like 250 words. That's quite a lot. You want to keep it smaller than that anyhow, so that's not going to be a significant addition.
Gotcha. I see. And I just have one last question. It's about the I think the deadline wise for submitting the manuscript. I think I heard it's like a rolling submission, but I just wanted to ask the upcoming issue, the date, or like kind of like a potential deadline just in case I prepare to work on my submission. Like, is it spring 2026, the upcoming issue, or is it like winter 2025, something like that? Just wanted to ask.
Sure. I'm going to let Eliana take that question because I'm going to look up some metrics real quick.
Sure. So it will definitely not be winter 2025. I think spring 2026 is a very reasonable deadline. So as I mentioned, the email that I sent you earlier today, so we work with a rolling submission system, and we ideally we'd look at twice a year, but sometimes depending on the number of manuscripts that we have, we go with it once a year. But ideally, right up, so you should be gathering feedback during the conference, right? So the people that will go to your presentation will have questions. So it's a really productive way to gather feedback on your work. And then you should take the feedback that you receive seriously to help you fine tune the manuscript that you will be writing based on your presentation. So and we will actually, so Alex will talk a little bit more about it, but in this slide that she has now, you'll see that we'll have another presentation or presentation kind of like this one in November to talk about how you can then incorporate the feedback that you received at your at the conference to develop your manuscript. So if you can work on the manuscript, incorporate the feedback, and have your initial submission sometime, say in December or during the break, because you will be, everybody's so busy at the end of November, beginning of December, finishing the semester and papers and all that. So you can definitely finish those and then work on the manuscript. But the sooner you can get it to us, the better, because then you will be receiving more feedback to fine tune your manuscript and making it better and better. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you all for joining us, and we appreciate your engagement and questions. Any other questions? I'm also looking in the chat. Great presentation, ladies. The information you shared was so good. There's no questions.
Okay, and I
Well,
think Alex will talk a little bit about our presentations at the conference as well.
and like we have more to say. We wanted to give everyone a chance to have questions, and you can still have
Yes.
questions, so you're
Yep.
certainly not cutting you off. But I know that some of the questions, because we're talking about moving from thinking about how do I organize a presentation that's going to facilitate movement into a journal submission, we have some other presentations that might be helpful for you. At the Georgia TESOL conference in Athens next week, Eliana and I will be presenting, we'll offer a presentation on publishing in the Georgia TESOL Journal, where we're really getting to the nitty gritty of the actual process and how that looks, step by step. That's going to be on Friday the 31st at 9 a.m. And then immediately following, we will be hosting a Georgia TESOL Journal showcase, and we will have authors from the new fall 2025 issue talking about their work in that space. And so that will also be a good place where perhaps questions about that process may be appropriate for folks who've gone through it just recently, right? Just published. So again, it's a good space to kind of see that translation of presentation and publication. And then we will also, Eliana and I will also be offering a Dr. Elizabeth Webb Professional Learning Series webinar on November 11th at 6 p.m. And so this is a really important thing to think about. And for those of you who are presenting at the conference, it's important to think about. The topic is, so you've received feedback, now what? So in your conference presentation, people will ask you questions. People will have comments. People may ask for clarification on things, right? And so all of those are things that you can note that help you push your work further, right? Because one thing that I find when I'm thinking through my presentations and my writing is, if I were an audience member, if I were a reader, what would I want to know? If you tell me you're doing a teaching technique in a school, I want to know, where's the school? How old are the students? What's the subject matter? What's the content area? Are these ELs? If they are, at what level? Right? Like, so all of the things, the questions that I want to know are things that providing information is going to make it better. So the questions that you receive, the conversations that you have, the discussion, the comments are going to help you improve your work. And so that's really important. Then once you get into the process of submitting a manuscript to a journal, you're going to get reviewer feedback, right? And you'll need to know, what do I do with this feedback? And so that will be our next PLS webinar that we'll be presenting on November 11th. So we've got a whole range of professional development and opportunities for you to engage with these ideas. Are there other questions? Okay.
Can you move to our last slide, Alex?
Can.
Yeah. So feel free to reach out to me, to Alex, to the journal. If you have any questions, we'll be very happy to talk to you all.
And the QR code takes you to the journal, and that's where you can read the journal, read about the journal, and also there are links there for submitting manuscripts to the journal. And again, we can also provide information. So we look forward to hopefully seeing you in another webinar and hopefully getting to talk with you in person in Athens next week.
That's right. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing your expertise and the wonderful ideas of how to go from presentation to published. We encourage you all to share your knowledge and expertise through our journal. And we look forward to seeing you all next week. I can't believe it's already here.
I know.
I'm excited.
So with that, I'm just going to share both Alex and Ileana kind of already referenced where you can go. But you can, is it sharing? I don't think it's sharing, is it?
No, not yet.
As mentioned, if you go to the Georgia TESOL website, up on the top bar, there's the link, the journal link, and that will take you to where you can make a submission and get other information about the journal. And we look forward to the next session. It's right after the conference, so it's going to give us some really great information following that presentation at the conference on how we can take that feedback and turn it into that journal article or journal entry, I should say. So with that, again, thank you, ladies, for sharing with us. And if you don't have anything else, I wish you all a wonderful evening and a fabulous Friday.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
All right. Good night, friends. See you in a week.